Hi, everybody. Welcome to or welcome back to Fragility Exhibition and Events. I am Christopher Schutte, Art, Experiential, and Innovation Director at Particle. Before we start, a brief introduction to the project. Fragility is an ongoing exhibition launched by Particle with the gracious support of the Italian Embassy in Kuala Lumpur. In particular, we'd like to thank Ambassador Maggipinto, and also we are grateful to the distinguished contributors, of which one we have today, MUSSTdesign, who's done the sound composing for us. Other contributors include Fondazione ICA Milano, Benini, Magazzino Italian Art, Art Tribune, and many others. So today is a special episode, the sixth episode in a series of Fragility Talks. It's cross-cultural conversations where our guests are enriching the actual exhibition with their contributions and particular perspectives on fragility. The series itself has been ideated together with ICA Milan and produced by Particle. And the aim is really to bring a sort of new reality in the way we are making culture and art more immersive and inclusive and closer to people. So the topic of today, we have two experienced practitioners in sound composing, even up to the latest technologies in AI-driven generative music and experiential projects. In particular, the part we'll focus on even and get into the conversation today is on fragility as a unique human interaction where we can actually look into how we can embrace our collective intelligence. So that is very exciting for us to explore together with these guests. So in these days, we're actually hosting a lot of live streaming events because of the situations with COVID. But we felt like this is the best way to bring you closer to art and art experiences. The best way is to do this live and interact together with our guests as part of Fragility Talks. So lastly, on a practical note, to ask questions, you can ask questions directly via Slido. And so we'll show you the Slido. You can actually register, snap the QR code and go in and use M111 to enter, or you can actually comment directly on the YouTube channel. So while you're doing that, I just want to introduce the two companies that are here, actually, the university and the sound composer that's here with us. MUSI-CO is one of the companies from, we have Lorenzo Brusci. MUSI-CO is an AI-driven software engine that generates music. It's doing adaptive real-time, copyright-free sound generation for music. It was founded already just 5 years ago, so it's very, very new. And the technology itself is actually allowing for adaptive landscapes that can actually change, be responsive to motion, to gestures in the environments, and actually, so it becomes really a spatial tool that helps us to interact in our environments. Very responsive. The person we have today is from Sunway University. So Sunway University is one of Malaysia's leading private universities, which is strictly non-for-profit. And they're actually supporting enterprises. They're undertaking research and doing a lot to solve global challenges like sustainability. It's a beautiful campus. If you have a chance when you're in Malaysia, have a look and visit it. It's kind of the new philosophy of the 15-minute city. 15-minute city is kind of the approach in the area they have. But as a new university, relatively new for the world, it's already ranked in the top 2% of universities around the world. So great honor to have also Matthew with us here today. So a little bit about Lorenzo. I was going to introduce Lorenzo as he is a very experienced experienced designer and artist, but he's also the CEO of two different companies. So MUSI-CO, as mentioned, the AI generative company, and also MUSSTdesign. So there it's multi-sensual spacing studio is what MUST stands for. But he's also bringing into the conversation today a sort of philosophical background from his studies many years ago and the many projects that he's done through experience design. But he's extremely articulate with his ability, actually, from the projects he's done to help us understand how different sound compositions are affecting people and how our spaces and our spatial context that are changing can actually influence our behavior and interact with people. So On the other side, Matthew Sansom. He's a professor of music and Vice-Chancellor of Education at Sunway University. He has also done many international projects, an international artist, and has worked across multimedia, so from sound, video, sculpture, performance, and musical compositions. So he's really focused into the improvisational aspects and the creative process and learning strategies for going forward that he's bringing into the university context. So with that, I think we can get started. I'd say the first question ask you, Matthew, but we're talking about looking at fragility and the sensibility to fragility in the exhibition. Has there ever been a time in your life when you perceive fragility as a strength rather than a form of weakness? Oh. We have a sound. Oh. Let's start. Let's start with you, Lorenzo.
Yes.
Oh, wait. Has there ever been a time in your life when you perceived fragility as a strength?
Matthew, can you hear us?
Oh.
So yeah, Chris, maybe we can.
Yeah, I can.
Very strange.
Yeah, we had to. Just wait for one moment, see if we can solve it. I think it can hear us, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a clear. I mean, fragility. You wanted it, and now you have it. Yeah, I think since the beginning, when you invited me, now we had these undertext, and the undertext was clearly the COVID times and how we were dealing with all these new settings. And so we really started exchanging very intimate thoughts on how we were taking advantage and how we were reacting to the events. And I was particularly touched, already telling you, I mean, very, very frankly, how I decided intentionally and radically to take full advantage of the moment. For example, exaggerating and hyper proliferating and consolidating and creating different strategies in order to be sharing and to be in contact with anyone. I mentioned, for example, that I started composing for specific friends. I started composing music for my friends, for the people that I couldn't meet. I started to invite them to have remote conversations in forms that were almost real-time improvisations becoming albums, like, no, the very same day. So we decided to break any time barrier and, just come together, act together, no matter the connectivity, no matter the physicality. At the end of the day, we had an album, we had music, we had images, we had thoughts, and everything was, I mean, okay, that's clearly the consequence of this new setting that was so fragile. We were trying to solidify, I mean, like really make everything extra solid. It's like, you think it's not physical? No, it's even more physical than before. I mean, how many times did we talk each other, over the last 2 years? 3 times. This time we talk every week. You're gonna hear from me every week and even more. So it was like, yeah, I know it's defensive, but at the same time, exploring, experimenting. So I could say I started an even more radical experimental life. That was my reaction to the fragility.
What did this contribute to you have a new album that was out just about...
Sorry, there are some noises. Okay.
You have a new album that was out about 2 weeks ago. At the end of March, you had a new album coming out. Was that part of some of these casual sound compositions you were sharing amongst friends? Was that a basis?
Yeah, because I mean, because you mentioned these, that I produce and release an album almost every week since months, since I would say March 2020. So what does it mean? It doesn't mean that they are more finished, or they are finished in a sort of a music ideal absolute way. It means that I need to keep these lines, these tensions. I need to keep them there. And it's, for me, they are not even more related to the music culture to cool. They are really related to the necessity of being entangled. Okay, so it's like it's not a matter, again, we talk about digital, we talk about technology. Sorry, I don't see the machine. I don't see them. I see humans. I see connectivity. I see interaction. So for me, machines are only, transitions, temporary stages and states. The goal is not there. So when they say you do AI, now you integrate composition, improvisation, and algorithmical protocols. I mean, sorry, the goal is there.
Yeah, exactly. So the one of the things in our conversations we've been having, we talked about the human way of working with tools doesn't change. No, the actual human approach and the way that the human creativity, the way of actually composing, and this is what remains the same. Technologies are changing every week, right? We're actually going to see an uptake. So one check, just Matthew, are you back with us? I could hear your...
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic.
I've had to resort to my classic iPhone to save the situation.
Well, glad to
so
have
that's
you
great.
Back with
well, what you were saying was a good segue to what I could bring in here, which is, the idea of vulnerability, the idea of fragility as vulnerability and humility, linking that to sort of timeless ways of creating. Connects really strongly with the way free improvisation works, where you're actually collectively finding a language that's shared, and that has to be done through a kind of openness and a careful listening, and also the willingness to fail. So those are all really timeless aspects of creative process, and are really integral to my work as it's evolved from a deep study of free improvisation as a way of trying to understand creative process in music making. Yeah. So that's where I come at the idea of fragility. Really, is the idea that for success in art and life, you need vulnerability and humility, and those are things that are always beneath the surface. And linked to that in relation to art making is the idea I mentioned of failure and the risks associated with that, and also being able to let go of control, which I think ties in nicely with Lorenzo's work and the generative methods more broadly. That it's about, from an artist's point of view, it's about letting go of certain aspects of the process and the outcomes, and inviting the audience to find their way into the experience aesthetically.
Question on this: has it been a gradual process, or is it something that you had a snap realization or a moment in time when you felt that something that just triggered this sort of insight on a project you're working on a particular?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned my doctoral work. Really, I started as a quite young, fresh graduate, trying to understand musical meaning more deeply. And the way I approached that was to look at free improvisation as somehow a kind of more a rawer uncooked kind of musical experience. And I used phenomenological methods, and that exposed the kinds of things I was just talking about. I understood the relational dynamic of the musical making process and creative process more broadly. And that gradually, it was a gradual process of actually integrating and deepening that understanding into my practice, which for me led quite strongly to sort of, I became almost kind of anti-music in the sense that I, the idea that music could be created to make someone feel something. I became less and less interested in that, and more interested in generative methods and making sound installations that were about a space and were about a space coming, finding what that space was suggesting, much like a free improviser would try and evolve a language in the moment of improvisation. My installation sort of extended that idea into trying to find a way of activating the space in a way that was not to the level of adaptability that Lorenzo is now working on, but certainly adaptive from the point of perception and experience. For the person coming into the space, they could direct themselves through it and define their own aesthetic encounter. So that was it. The short answer to your question is it's been gradual and it's ongoing. So yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned. I mean, Lorenzo is doing things now with advanced technologies, but before he was doing things that were responsive to spatial environments. Before, things with sound masking in London. I mean, some of the earlier projects Lorenzo has done had the same type of feel, this kind of improvisational. There is a space, there is a need, a human need, and I'm trying to actually solve even a health issue in the case of London. Around Hyde Park, there's a lot of noise. A sound masking solution is actually, a responsive sound masking solution is actually interesting.
So your mic, Chris. Your mic moved, so we lost a few. I mean, yeah.
No, but in that particular case, again, it's a responsive space where there is an aspect of processing, of responsiveness. It was done at a different level, maybe technologically, but the philosophical kind of, let's say, the thread remains, I think, relatively unchanged there in the dealing with spaces. Go ahead, Lorenzo.
Well, I mean, I always considered improvisation as the mother of generative strategies. So again, I mean, this proves that to me, it's not a matter what kind of tools we are using. Context and interaction is everything. So you know very well, when I started designing sonic gardens, my main concern was music complexity, music variety, unpredictability, and what happens to the experience. We all were very disappointed from the experience of music in the 90s and in the 80s. Obviously, the memory of what it could have been, the revolutionary idea of opening up all kind of music structure and just taking it everywhere, then had a clear wall in front of us. The clear wall was the concert hall, the steady behaviors, the steady musical attitudes, from the reception point of view, but also from the making. So, I mean, I have to frankly say that after going through improvisation and going through, I would say, formal composition, myself and all my collaborators, I really felt the necessity to explore space as a place of freedom for the dramaturgical power of music. So the combination of architecture and music was, to me, just the event. I started to imagine and design how music could change spatial perception, the perception of space, and I started to invite musicians to perform, inside this new mindset. And I have to say that from that moment on, I'm talking about the end of the 90s, the beginning of 2000, everything became a matter of saving richness, saving linguistic potential and history, and at the same time giving anyone, we could say democratically, anyone the possibility of accessing, interacting, being exposed, overexposed, immersed. Immersion was one of the main categories that we used to use at that time. So, yeah, I lost you, but I guess you heard what I said, and I really believe that now synthetic action is a sort of, to me, a sort of ethical call. What do I mean? We already talked about this. I really need. This is a time where creativity has a strong call, a strong mission, just to show that it's possible to create value on a daily basis. I mean, just creating value, not imitation by itself. I mean, we talk about persuasive economy, manipulation, attention economy. It's all true, but we have the tools, educational tools, cultural tools, to really make a difference, make a creative difference on a daily basis. So my lesson from fragility and remote lives is action at all levels. And this is what I'm doing. With the companies, call them companies, I call them families. I mean, I don't even believe in economy models. What are we talking about? They are not representing the complexity of life. We need to make more values than what what the world at the moment, the fashion mechanism is telling us that value is. Sorry, no way we can make it. We can generate more value that is codified at the moment.
Yeah, this is let me stop you there. That I think some of the points you made, generative strategies, the interaction, the context being extremely important. The tools are becoming more powerful. So again, if we're putting these tools into the hands of regular consumers, how are we going to actually help conceptualize the space where they should play? Let's say, I know from your point of view, from a professional point of view, it's easy to conceptualize these things. These are standard ways of approaching the problem. But once we have synthetic tools in the hands of basic consumers, how do you see us giving shape to those? Maybe I can ask Matthew if you have some comments here to jump in. But the rails, let's say, or the framework, no?
I mean, a couple of responses, I suppose. We can't underestimate the creativity and responsivity of the ways people are using digital technologies generally. I mean, I think similar to Lorenzo in some ways, in the sense that there's tremendous growth and opportunity in the ways people are taking these technologies and using them in ways nobody's anticipating, as well as against and sort of alongside the expected ways in which they get used. The other side I was thinking is educationally from me, where I'm actually working with music students who typically, and perhaps the Asian mindset and culture here is a bit more compliant and following of expectations, hierarchies, and that reflects itself in the kind of music making and the way music technologies in particular get used. And that, that's not unique to this region. There, even back in the UK, students would fulfill expectations, and technologies are kind of designed and marketed in ways which invite certain types of response. And really my job educationally is to try and introduce students to new kinds of tools and encourage them and show them ways in which historically they've always been subverted by artists, to actually open up and explore those new possibilities. I mean, the easy one for us is, most students have a kind of linear multi-track mindset, and just getting them to start using Ableton immediately kind of makes them think differently. And then, of course, within Ableton, you've got tremendous possibilities of starting to really let go of control and move more into the sort of territory we were beginning with.
It's really interesting you say the hierarchical culture, because you've got tools that allow total freedom. And so let me transition into then what is the role of the artist? As you're doing, you're trying to bring in, let's say, permission to actually break the rules, to actually give people the space to become more creative, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I just follow up really quickly on that, I mean, permission is a key thing. I've always thought that's what I do as an educator, is to show students that they have permission to kind of break the rules, essentially, and think differently. And then the work of the artist, for students I work with, really, it's a lot about trying to figure out identity, which here in this region is very interesting. Cultural identity is very kind of complex web of competing aspects, which trying to work that out musically is often, it's quite a challenge for anybody, and it's a very kind of challenging space for students to enter into. But sorry, Lorenzo.
No, it's also a kind of collective mind at stake. I mean, it's clear we have an advantage coming from the music active culture. And I can imagine for you teaching this kind of freedom. So you were mentioning, a DAW, a digital audio workstation.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how software management, let's say software-based management of music, is probably the biggest music event over the last 40 years. I'm serious. I mean, people developing, hundreds, thousands of people developing plugins and music instruments. And then Matthew comes and says, hey, wait a second. No, there's a basic level where everybody is using the same tools. So now I'm here to teach you, most of all, a different mindset. Because the moment you are using that plugin, the moment you are using that specific sequencer, thousands of people, millions of people are doing the same. So, and again, you see, a synthetic stance is always unifying and creating a very homogeneous landscape. So the real topic is, what are we expecting from humans, on the verge of 8 billion? I mean, what are we expecting to this specific, advanced, demographical and democratic planetarian culture? These are topics for us. This is the way we need to rethink our capacity to lead. That was one of your topics. What does it mean nowadays to lead? I mean, to teach, to train. So all we really set up a clear agenda for opening, expanding, creating value, or whatever we do is always, following and chasing what? The unknown. I mean, so the unknown. You think that politics has a clear idea of what is the unknown, and they don't tell us? Bullshit. That's fake. No, they don't know. So nobody knows. And we need to take care of this unknown in a new way. It's called collective intelligence, but that has to be designed all together.
This is what we're seeing with the embedded tools, is there's a collective intelligence embedded inside those tools. And that set of tools has also its own value systems. So again, the big question is who's deciding which values are
we need
into the
we need to design that all together. I mean, that's not a company agenda. That's not even a state agenda. And in AI, it's crucial.
design is too important to be left up to designers, is what some say, right? So how do we?
I have ideas about it. We can talk in the future how to set up such a shared agenda.
Matthew, how do you see that? I'm fascinated by the multicultural aspect of Malaysia. I've been over, there's so many languages, so many different cultures together. I think it's a huge opportunity to actually see what can we do as far as participatory opportunities, bringing together sort of collective intelligence. Where do you see this? Where do you see this going? How do you see this evolving in around the university, around Malaysia? What types of assumptions are you making? What types of goals do you have to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm cautious to talk about such things as an outsider. I'm very much new here and an observer and not enough of a participant culturally. And also certainly in Malaysia, the complexity of that intercultural dynamic is a political dynamic. Right. And there are real challenges there in terms of finding a common voice. There's certainly a political agenda to talk about unity and equity. And they're probably the more interesting spaces I see amongst the students, particularly some of our film students who work tremendously well collectively, regardless of cultural, ethnic, or religious background. So I think probably the best response I could offer is I think there's hope, and I see evidence of that in the youth. And I see it in the evidence of their creative work that they do. So I think I'm struggling a bit professionally as well, because I am an artist and I have been for many years. I'm less so an artist right now in my role at the university, more moving towards a sort of administrative and managerial side of things. And for me, really, I see the people who are really working out those kinds of issues are in the youth, and that's it's their domain in a way. And I think they are the ones really facing those issues and trying to work them out collectively and culturally. And probably their voice would be a much more interesting voice in answering that kind of a question, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think what you're driving at, though, that on an institutional level, there's always a sort of a layer of sort of bureaucracy, a layer of fuzziness, a layer of political charged issues that it's you have to be very careful. It's very delicate to interact in those types of environments. But when you get down to an artist level, a practitioner level, where you're actually doing, we say mani and pasta, like hands in kneading the dough and actually getting things done. That's when people come together. You're talking more on the collaborative projects. That's a sort of a solution, you could say, that bringing the cultures together actually to do something, as Lorenzo was saying before, in action. They're actually solving problems together, looking at from different points of view, and they're actually creating something together. So I think I think you answered the question. The way to do it is really to bring it down to a very collaborative level where you're acting together. Yeah. Lorenzo, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I was talking about families or communities when I let's say refer to my teams or work, and these individual collective logical jumps back and forth is quite crucial in the way we approach the world today. And I've been teaching and working in the Middle East, in China. So you know my life. I've been traveling all the time, and I love how people can set up very quickly a mediation table and negotiate, drinking, smoking, playing music, fantasizing, philosophy, whatever. So it's really time to be able to intersect and interconnect this clear, wide, global potential into a kind of energy that probably we don't even know how to name. Again, and I was attacking before this reductionistic attitude of monetizing, but it's not just the classic critic, it's just we have enough, okay, of this kind of reductionism. So I understand the political agendas, I understand that we understand everything, but at the same time, we still lack a solidarity capacity and intelligence. We lack an ecology intelligence. So where are these intelligences? It's not true that they are not there. They have to be combined. They have to be orchestrated. So we need levels of action. I know, Matthew is on the field teaching, so he knows every day what it means to have micro communities, establishing themselves and then disappearing, going back to the world without knowing what kind of capacity they will have again to re-experience, but what they experienced at school. But at the same time, it's like, yes, that's a good example. How do we create these new gatherings, new, how can I call the organisms that are able of different levels of intelligence and capacity in action? So these are topics to me also when we design an AI tool. Again, you tell me, okay, you have an economic agenda, you have a financial agenda, you have a methodological, scientific agenda. Yes, but the thing is that at the end of the day, when I tell you that for me at the moment, media are becoming utterances, and any copyright law is inconsistent when you really are at the verge of such a huge revolution. What is TikTok? People that are using all these, pinpoint, pip, pop, pop, or what? Of incredibly reduced and simplified multimedia aggregates. They are becoming like speaking. So media like utterances, new logical capacities that have never been regulated before. How do we do it? Economically? Legally? AI and law, it's already, a headache you cannot imagine. They have no idea how to manage it, They have to use the old tools when they attack hip hop and sampling culture, That's the best they can do.
Yeah.
Guys.
I think it's good. It's a good point that you said something about the community being a sort of living. It's almost like a living organism. You can almost describe it as this. And what's interesting there is if you distill it down to different cultures and societal traditions that are acting, then you get a sort of organism that has characteristics that you want to highlight and evidence. That you sort of choreograph how the organism moves, how it behaves. And the richness of the uniqueness of that organism actually becomes this diversity and the actual the basis in traditions and cultures and societal differences, and not the synthetic sort of sound bites on a high level trying to command attention, like as you're saying here. So how do we create this sort of system where we can actually make it more equitable, but then actually bring out these differences as positives and not as negatives, let's say. So
okay, obviously Matthew can have his own strategy. I tell you, to me, for example, there's a clear scientific attitude. We almost release all the research we do. That doesn't mean that we don't want to keep certain advantages, especially because big corporations, they are very aggressive and we don't have so much power. We are 20 people. You can imagine, it's like we stay at night training the networks and we have amazing AI people. But sorry guys, we are 20 people, not 200, not 2,000. But for example, in training neural networks, with my all-time friend and scientific main advisor, Paolo Frasconi in Florence, within, it's a clear path. We need to first of all, take advantage of who we are. For example, we don't have huge data sets. So you know what we do? We assign music composition to real composers. We don't just go and browse anything. You know, the old approach, the robust approach, you just harvest everything and you let the networks learn. What? Learn what? Chaos? I mean, for example, we are very humble. We really train networks on limited, highly skilled, highly qualified datasets, specialized, so humans. Okay, so you have a group of humans that are assigning humans to design datasets. Then there are obviously models that are designed by humans. Then there are humans optimizing the results, tuning their hyperparameters. And at the end of the day, humans are using the results. So do you see the machine? No, you see humans using machines. Oh, it's an old story. The more you use, the more you will use. The more you will change, the more you will shape. I don't want to sound formalistic or too formalist, but it's a cycle. But we need to act in the cycle, not outside of the cycle.
This is going back to Matthew, without going into the details, but I'd like to turn it around from the student's point of view. If you look at the younger generation, what are the questions? What are the curiosities that they're coming to you with? What are they asking you about evolving systems? Just say from a curiosity point of view, from a creation point of view, what are they?
I mean, I think not the kind of work we're doing here. Not so much. There's not so much interest, I think. But back in the UK, we had a kind of a Moog modular lab where they were very much interested in modular synthesis, and I think really for me that was really just, as Lorenzo was saying at the beginning, was that this was just an extension of the mother of generative methods, which is free improvisation. And I think at an undergraduate level, at least, they're still babies, and they're kind of at the mercy of not so many of them have woken up to the politics of big data and their role in the system. So I'm not getting much kind of intellectual work in that area with students, so I can't really respond specifically to that question.
Because a lot of what I see, a lot of cultural differences. Sometimes there's a tendency to start with the technology. You'll jump on the latest. What seems to be the buzz.
Well, many of our students are still at a stage of kind of needing to master. Is really what I was saying earlier. They're coming in with a kind of desire to master linear, analog versions, digital versions of the analog world, master track recording studio technology. That's their baseline. And as I was saying earlier, really the best job I've been doing with those is to just introduce them to repertoire like noise music and ambient music, generative methods, glitch, to start showing them this is where the technology is starting to actually shape and define musical language, and that being a computer-based musician means you're dealing with a different kind of medium now. Music is a different entity to what it was just a few decades ago. Echoing much of what Lorenzo's already said, and that's really the work I'm doing with them. And again, much of that ties with permission. It's like, for a lot of students, the idea that it's okay to write beat-based music that's influenced by dance music is a great thing. It's a wonderful thing that their professors saying, yes, you can actually do that. And I was a DJ. I've got a few favorite stories, which is, I used to that I used to be a DJ and that I used to DJ drum and bass and jungle in the mid-90s. And then my other favorite story, which Lorenzo will identify with this, I'm sure, is that, you know, the bulk of the music I wrote in the late 90s was using an Akai sampler that was fully expanded to 32 megabytes. And it takes some time for them to grasp what that means in terms of memory, you know. So, and here we are having conversations about artificial intelligence and how that's actually now immediately accessible in all sorts of ways. You know.
Yeah, but
it's a different world.
The mindset, the permission, we're coming back to those same ideas, the sensitivity that you've developed over years and experiences. Let's come back to that. This whole idea of fragility and this whole idea of the sensitivity to understanding these evolutionary differences, but also the complexity across cultures, the complexity across different tools they can choose to use, genres of music mixing. There's a lot of, let's say, fragility embedded in all of these choices. And I think the question we should maybe end with is, could this be taught? Now, can fragility, is it something that you can actually instruct, or is it something that you have to say expose people to in some way through actionable lived experiences? Or how do you see this? Again, to you, Matthew.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it's definitely something that has to be taught, and it's not difficult. I mean, just to answer really briefly, I've got one of my favorite quotes from Anton Ehrenzweig, who was primarily a Kleinian. He applied sort of Kleinian psychoanalytic ideas to creative process, and you know, he talked about needing a passive watchfulness when you look at the canvas. You need a passive watchfulness. So that idea of passivity and action being finely balanced, which goes back to the way you described fragility in the opening, is a key thing, which can absolutely be taught. For me, the best way to teach that is through free improvisation. It's such a powerful tool pedagogically, because you have to listen and formulate a response. And you have that. It's a very this passive watchfulness in oral terms is what you need as an improviser. And then you take that, once you've learned it experientially, you can apply it to anything. Yeah, so that's my take on that.
You know, in the 90s, I started a project. I used to call it a living score, and it was interlanguage, no, like. Dancers were conducting musicians, and musicians were conducting visual designers, or architects and visual designers together with choreographers were, So I was writing scores that were interlinguistic. So I totally agree with you that improvising, to learn how to improvise, at the meta level, or we can call it where all the digital utterances are coming together, will require the capacity to listen. We could call the new noise era like the media noise era, where you cannot stop hyperstimulation. So, you know what happens when you improvise. I mean, obviously, we know it's like a self-consistent environment, more for the people that are improvising them than for listeners. That's a clear thing since 30, 40 years. And it was a political stance, probably very strong. It was, for sure, no problem. So it's strong now, the call for finding analogies and metaphors on how to reintroduce the capacity to interact, in the era of digital proliferation and multimedia utterances. So synthetic tools, together with the capacity to organize and orchestrate, in real time, inter-orchestrate the organization of these flows, is an amazing occasion to teach how to risk. Because at the end of the day, we need to, okay, I don't teach, you teach, but let's say I try to be to be someone that shares a lot. So I share my necessity to take the risk. Okay, this risk of being hyperstimulated, hyper talkative, hyper generous, whatever, to be myself, like a living, constant action maker. Okay, but it's just accepting a condition that probably is going to be incredibly common in the next years. Proliferation, risks to be taken at many levels. And we need to, for example, teach young students very happy, very enthusiastic about being DJs. We should teach them to design immersive spaces, for example, because the music they are designing can have the acoustical information, the spatial information to become a space. Maybe a virtual space at the beginning. Why not? Are you happy about these television sets that we are using 2021 to interact? Still televisions? It's still a television. We are walking around with small televisions. Then we have bigger television to make these fantastic calls. Happy about the results, not very happy about the medium. So work to be done.
I think some great comments. I think this ties back into a lot of themes that we're seeing emerging with things like active listening, appreciative inquiry now. So actually this whole idea of passive watchfulness is very linked, I think, also to this, just having curiosity. Now, as you're absorbing something and looking at it openly, but with curiosity and attentively. So I think that very good comments. From Lorenzo, the being hyperstimulated, active, and then actually navigating this in real time is, I think, the concluding remarks that I gather from you. So I think that's good. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. I think very intriguing, interesting conversation. So thank you both. To Lorenzo, thank you,
Matthew. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Particle.
And
thank you.
Stay on the call, and we'll have a quick chat to close. But thank you, everyone, from your participation, and please do take a visit to FRAGILITY, the exhibition, if you haven't. There's some wonderful sound landscapes designed, ambient sound from Lorenzo, so you can experience that. And with that, I'll close it out. So everyone have a great day.
Ciao. All the best.
Bye-bye.